So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the World IA Cafe series. Thank you for joining in. I'm sure we'll have a great webinar, and I'm sure you will greatly enjoy it. My name is Rupa Mishra, Associate Professor at Rutgers University. I teach and manage as well the User Experience Design and Product Design concentrations in the MBS program. I will post the link. I'm also an active member of World IA Association. I see Grace here, our co-president. The speaker for today's interactive session is Shari Thurow. Shari has a very impressive resume and background. She is an information architect and search director at Information Architecture Gateway. She has a master's degree from University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and has over 2 decades of experience as an information architect. And currently she is pursuing her doctoral degree. Is it in information architecture?
Yes.
Okay, it is in information architecture. Very impressive. Let me share her LinkedIn profile link here in the chat. Okay. So I would also like to remind you that we'll be recording all the speakers in this World IA Cafe series, and the videos will be available on our World IA website. Let me post the link of the website. It is a great organization to network and to meet people from all over the world. If you are interested, then please join the organization. Every year we host the World IA Day, and this has been going on since 2012, long time. The format of this cafe series will be this: 45 minutes for the talk, followed by 15 minutes Q&A. So please don't hesitate to ask a lot of questions. Also, I would like to remind you that this is a great opportunity to network with one another. If you like, you can share your LinkedIn profile link in the chat. I will just share mine. And I will also share our department's website link as well, if anyone is interested. So enjoy this talk, and now over to Shari.
All right. Share. And good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody, because we have people from all over the place, and I'm happy to be here. And since I know for a lot of you, it is the end of the day or it's nighttime, I decided to change the format of what I normally do. And what the reason for that is, well, I mentioned that I mentor at University of Illinois in the School of Information. And one of the things that my mentees like to hear about are real world stories. Being an information architect, what to expect, the good things and the bad things, and what did I learn from them. And so that's what I thought I would do, is share my my experience with a couple of contracts that I recently completed. And one of the things that a lot of people don't know about me is I am, even though I don't have my doctorate degree, I am an editor of an academic journal that's based in. Well, one of the things I do, and as part of my job, is I get to read forthcoming information about information architecture, and I'm particularly interested in search, ahead of time, and I get to yay or nay journal articles. And that's a hard job because it takes a lot to do a journal article. So I'm used to saying yes and no and being very, very direct. And sometimes in information architecture that doesn't work. but sometimes it does. And this is how we came up with the topic is with my mentees is, does an information architect's job end prematurely on digital experience design projects, whether it's a product design or it's a website or anything like that? Do we find that we get siloed right away? And we're going to talk about that. And then on the other end, are project managers limiting the abilities of certain information architects, especially those with technical skills? And I work with a lot of information scientists who have considerable technical skills, and I'm an information scientist, so I can code a whole site and stuff like that. I can do style sheets and all the HTML fun stuff, and artificial intelligence included. So do product managers limit you from reaching the areas that you need to reach? And these are the two items that I chose for our stories. So, and I will share this with everybody, so don't worry about it if you don't see some of these samples. But I use samples, and they're not necessarily my clients. I use samples in presentations to illustrate a park in Illinois too. I almost thought you were in my time zone. So there's a common belief that IA, information architecture, should precede technical development and design. And as a result of that, architecture becomes siloed, and design becomes siloed, and development becomes siloed, even though they overlap. And as a result, because everybody wants everything yesterday, I see that the information architecture process is often skipped or ignored. I see this in search a lot, which is really strange because information architecture actually makes search results more accurate, whether it's a site search, an app search, software search, or anything like that, even chatbot search. And IA is actually an iterative or an ongoing process. It's no different than UX. It's no different than usability. It's no different than search. It's ongoing. It's not a linear process. It's actually more like this. In fact, I've got to get the citation for this because I saw this on LinkedIn today, and I loved it because this is exactly what information architects do. Iterate, do the test, validated, yes, push to the next team, problems, yes, go back. So we see this all the time. And this is what I think that IA, if we had to map it out, should look like. I'll make this easier to read eventually, but I just saw this on LinkedIn today. And what I saw is something from 2007 that I wrote about SEO, and it's the same with IA, is that if you're going to design or redesign or re-architect a site, people try to put this into a linear process, and they also forget about downstream dependence. Everything you do in step 1 is going to affect step 4. And when you're doing Agile, for those of you that work in an Agile environment, things you do at step 1 are going to affect the technical things at step 10. So it's really important to keep that term downstream dependence as part of your vocabulary, because you're going to need to convince stakeholders how important your job is. So this is what happened short time ago. We were negotiating for a contract, and they said, we use the Polar Bear book as our definition of information architecture, which is great because so do I. And by the way, my favorite color is green. That's why you see the green there. And those of you who don't know the Polar Bear book, it's that information architecture for the web and beyond. And I thought that was perfect, because if I ever needed to justify a decision, an information architecture decision, if I know the client is using the Polar Bear book as a frame of reference, I can always say, well, the polar bear book says to do this. So I was pretty happy about that. And then I got the question, if you were talking to stakeholders, what is your definition of information architecture? And I couldn't use the polar bear book as the definition. So what I did is I used the one that the former Information Architecture Institute uses, because I thought it works. I think it works very well. It's organizing and labeling content so that it's easy to use and easy to find. And it has to be easy to find because you can't use it unless you find it. So there are 4 words that are important: organizing, labeling, use, and find. So I thought that was straightforward enough. The next question was more of a comment, and it says, oh, we only want you to do structure. Now, these are opportunities. I know this might sound strange, but these are opportunities because, and so I look at their answer, because if their answer isn't yes or no, or if they make a side comment like that, I know something. So I questioned that, and immediately I went, okay, they silo architecture, design, and development. And basically what they told me is, we only want you to do structure. So they put a stop sign or a red stoplight. And I and my group was not allowed to enter into design and development. So these people, this group, and this is a group that definitely has accessibility issues, all types, not just vision, hearing, motor skills, cognitive, all that kind of stuff. So everything that they were asking for was basically formative or foundational without the chance to test it on an ongoing basis. And that's very frustrating, because you can make all these hypotheses and make all these experiments, and you're never going to know the results. So here's, just so you know, for those of you who need the reference, this is what the Information Architecture Institute, former Information Architecture Institute, used for its definition. So as a response, I quickly noted that they siloed and they were giving me the big old red stoplight. And I asked, does your website currently have a formal navigation system and a formal labeling system? And the answer was no. And I'm going, okay. Does the contract allow for creating and maintaining a formal labeling system? And that was a good question to give them. And the reason it was such a good question is that the word maintenance. So we're not just doing something at the beginning, we're trying to maintain it as the site evolves. So there are different types of labels, and I like to use the meeting. There are 4 types of labels on a website, and I'm going to use an older version of Mayo Clinic, but just know if you want to find this version, of course, you can use a video in these screenshots, but you can also go to archives.org and get it. So the first label to understand is a document, a content label. And content labels, especially the heading, the very first heading on the page, which should be unique, is hugely important. So we have on here a heading and a subheading. And what's interesting about this is sometimes people have a question. And you'll see a lot of question words show up, even though there isn't a question on the page. So what's the question of definition? Influenza. What is the flu? So there are rules for doing good headings to make it more readable, findable, information more easy to discover. And that's moving important words that people expect to see to the front of headings, because it increases the likelihood that people will notice them. And the reason for that is in the West, people read from left to right. So that will capture their attention. But if you begin, let's say you have, 8 bullets, but if you have all these keywords at the beginning, people are going to ignore that very first part. So you have to show variety, but definitely keep your most important words in front of in the headings. And also, because this is what this would look like on mobile. And just so you know, I have seen not much of a difference between menu, the hamburger menu, and search. I find that, you can put search first and then menu, and it doesn't make a huge difference. What's really good is the touch targets are the right size, and they are also spaced very well apart. But here they have jump menu, which is sections. And they always say when there's an advertisement, and the benefit of using jump links increases as the screen size decreases. So if your target audience is primarily mobile, you have to know how to architect the content on the page. And that is something that I'm always thinking. And when I'm doing my information architecture research, I want to know what are the devices people are using and why. And the reason there's an emphasis on search for me is that these places get their answers to questions from search engines, the web search engines. So the next type are navigation, and here there are 5 levels of navigation, and after 5 levels then it's time to do a different information architecture. I found that a lot of people tend to ignore navigation if it's gray, because gray means not available. And I also found that using the logo in the middle makes things less noticeable. In fact, a lot of people didn't notice the 2nd level navigation. 3rd stood out, 4th level's here, 5th level's here. So these are navigation labels. Now, there's a navigation label here. It's called resources. I always test that because resources is what's known as a vague label. You'll find in different types of industries, the word resources has different meanings for different groups of people. So sometimes you have to add a word, links and resources or financial resources, to make it that navigation label more clear. So here's an example of a label I do not use, and that's called Explore. And it's next to something that looks like a magnifying glass, so people actually think that search is going to open up. On this website, there was 95% abandonment when people came to this homepage, because this is a homepage of a real website, and traffic plummeted so badly they had to put the old navigation back. And so you can see search is back where it is, and you notice that how it's laid out is it begins with the word instead of the icon. I thought it was interesting that they used an envelope for subscribe, because I would have used that for contact or email. But since they got all their traffic back, they're happy about it. So be aware of vague labels and be aware of also vague icons. Most icons do need some kind of label. Another type of label is a file name, and an image file name is something a lot of people overlook. An image file name is actually a ranking factor, and has been a ranking factor for many years in image search engines. But if you look at this, this is an image of cataracts. This is something an information architect would do. This is called a mini IA, or a mini information architecture. How do you format a graphic image? Do you use an image heading? If you do, where do you put it? Are you using a caption? If you are, where are you putting it? Are you putting it beneath the photo? Are you putting it next to the photo? And also, if you are trying to share this image, you don't put the share icons far away from this image. You put the share icons next to the image. So this is something that an information architect would do and help the design team and the technical team format this in multiple ways so this type of image would be found. And one of the things they would also fix is this horrendous URL structure. So first of all, no spaces, because you don't want the percentage sign. And you also don't want underscores, because search engines treat underscores as characters. So you want to use hyphens. And this just sounds really weird. JPEG, which implies a picture, and ping, which implies it's a graphic image. Is it a JPEG or a ping? So a lot of this is, pardon my language, gobbledygook. So there needs to be some kind of a labeling system for graphic images. And you'd be really surprised how much more graphic images get shared on social media when there is a better label name. So don't do that. So we were talking about document labels. Now there's two types. There's the HTML title tag, which says influenza flu, and then it goes Mayo Clinic. Now, this is why Mayo Clinic was smart. Who uses the word influenza? Medical professionals. Who uses the word flu? Patients and patient caregivers. And definition is up front. So what is the flu? And then definition is highlighted. So these are really, really good visual cues. And this has been maintained. And also, if you notice at the top, that you'll see that reading left to right at the end of the URL structure is a number. And the number doesn't make any sense. But you can look at the URL structure and say, and just show people the URL structure. What page do you believe you're looking at? Or what do you think you'll see when you look at this web address? And you get a mental model of what people expect to see on your web pages. So this is something I definitely do, is I test that labeling system. And then very high level technical people is HTML and JavaScript and CSS labels. If you mess up those types of labels, you could mess up how the site is being viewed on multiple devices, software, everything. So it's a good idea to keep an information architect, especially one with technical skills, or at least hire a group of information architects that work together really well, and there's a technical person on staff. Now, my supervisor for this particular project used the analogy of swim lanes for Agile. And that's really what they're trying to do with the sprints, is put everything in its swim lane. And so even though I know, and we all know that IA is ongoing, what I try to do for these sprints is come up with a phrase that will make the stakeholders happy. If you do something, if you add this feature to the shopping cart, then this user group, let's say, if you add this, once something is added to cart, such as complete this outfit, or if you buy a pair of shoes, especially if they're sneakers, you're definitely going to want socks to go with it. This person will do a desired call to action, like add to cart. We will know this by a specific metric. And this is what stakeholders want to see. If you do this, then this user group, do this, and we will know this by increased sales. We'll see this by more clicks. We will see this by more touches on a phone. And this helps keep us in a lane and keeps stakeholders happy. And it's really important to use the right test or the right experiment. I don't only use closed and open card sort tests or tree tests. I use all kinds of tests, and it's the right test for the right client. So if I'm looking for a mental model, especially if I'm doing a baseline expectancy test, you show people a prototype, or you show people something, and you ask them, what do you expect will happen if you touch here on the phone? And you don't show people what will happen, because they all say the same thing. Oh, I said that was supposed to happen. That's what I just didn't say it. If they thought it was happening, they probably would have said it. But there's all kinds of things that you can use. If people can't afford a usability test, I like to do a sample of one test with a heuristic review. And basically all I'm trying to do is identify roadblocks, push people past their comfort zone, and find all the places where they are likely to abandon, or we see a reduction of trust, or we see episodes of pleasant surprises. So make sure you're using the right test. So because I asked the right questions, even though I was very surprised, we ended up changing their minds to keep the information architecture going through the design and the development process. So before I go to the next item, I was just curious, have any of you experienced this siloing of architecture without being involved in the design process? Because, you obviously need somebody who's objective to test the designs and test the prototypes, because the designers and the developers certainly can't test them because they're extremely biased. Because I see this happen a lot. Okay, then I'll move on. And this was this is the shocker of my life, because my IA life, because one of my students, and she's actually from China, and she works on a very, very, very large medical site in China. And ironically, I worked on a very, very, very large medical site in the United States. And what we were doing was comparing how US people from the United States were different from people in China when it came to healthcare, because our healthcare systems are so different. So one of the first things that we wanted to do is determine how big is the gap. A lot of people will do user personas, but they won't do an organizational persona or a business persona or a nonprofit persona. Basically, what you're trying to figure out is how big is the gap between user expectations and what the organization expects. And that is what I was looking for, is the gap. And I was very, very surprised to find out that the gap is as big as the Grand Canyon in some places. So what we want to do is get that gap closed, build bridges so that searcher and user expectations are supported when business goals are being met. So we're making not only the stakeholders happy, but we're making all the users happy. And this is what gets trust and loyalty and lifetime value of a customer. And so this is why we actually do these personas, and it really, really helps. So even if you don't do personas, you do profiles, the idea is to find how different the mental models are of the organization and the actual user groups, because a lot of times a website will have more than one user group. So I got on this project with some colleagues, and just so you know, I happened to be working with probably the best UX designer I've ever worked with. She's amazing. I am so glad that I met this person. To me, it was the best part of the project. But they were siloed. In fact, siloing was one of the biggest problems the site has. And the more information silos you have, the less likely people are going to be able to find things. And this is by asking their social group, because a lot of times women are the main decision makers when it comes to medical care. So she's the patient caregiver. A woman is usually the patient caregiver. So there's a lot of talking going along, a lot of collaboration. It's asking, browsing. People browse more than they search. And rare exceptions are people like me who search for a living. And searching. So information architecture affects all those things. So huge problem. But here's what I found is our IA group wasn't even part of the architecture process. They were a little part of the design process and a little part of the development process, mostly because we had really good technical architects on our team, but we constantly were told, well, the content management system. So we kept hearing that. It was very frustrating. So that development part almost got a red light. So this was the biggest red flag because of the downstream dependence that I was talking about. And this is what I learned and our group learned is that the information architecture and the navigation system was predetermined. So before they even hired information architects, and I learned at a later date that this organization goes through information architects, like water down the drain. And they had decided that faceted classification was the best information architecture and that the navigation system would be by tags. And that was the only navigation system that they were going to have. And I could not believe what I was seeing because I knew immediately, having worked on healthcare and health websites for many, many years, faceted classification is definitely not how users organize information. And the tag navigation leads to a lot of technical issues. And one of the reasons that faceted classification was a problem was that the person who decided that faceted classification was the right way to go was the person who developed the content management system. So what do we have? We have information architecture by the technology people, which we're getting the mental models of the technology people. We are not getting the mental models of actual users, neither the healthcare professionals or the patients and the patient caregivers. So, I understand that the citation is back to 2007, but it's still true. Technology-centered design is generally counterproductive. And all of his books are fantastic. So if any of you, and he's not paying me to say this, all of these books are fantastic. So I highly recommend them if you don't have them. Now, these are some of the technical issues that happens on search engines. One of them is it lowers the index count. There's a maximum number of pages that web search engines will allow in there to rank. So if you deliver duplicate content to a search engine, they're going to filter out the duplicates so less pages are available to rank. Your best converting pages might not even appear in search results, and your partner sites could do better than you, even though your site is the origin of that information. When a search engine determines that a website is a waste of their resources. So an example would be a calendar. If you have a calendar on your website, I would tell a search engine, don't come in there, because there's always going to be a time it tends to crash a search engine. Search engines learn what crashes their systems and what is a drain on their resources, and they don't visit your site as often. So now your site doesn't have the most updated information. And ultimately what this leads to is a poor searcher experience, and that has a very, very negative brand impact. And so I do a lot of brand impact tests or brand recognitions tests, and image search is very important for that, just so you know. So what I said, I had to be direct because we had a limited amount of time to fix this. And I just said, I'm concerned about the use of faceted classification because they lead to duplicate content delivery. I love the response. No, it doesn't. I didn't say, how would you know? I wanted to. And then I just asked because I was new and I wanted to know what were the methods used to determine that users organize content by facets, and the answer was none. So this person and this group of people decided to use this one person's mental model, and this person was using his personal preferences and site metrics for the decisions in all the groups, the marketing group, the technology group, the content and the copywriting group. It was ridiculous. So everything was out of context. So I showed them an example of a site that did something really well using the user's language. And it was something that was, something they're familiar with. This is the National Cancer Institute. And I don't know what PDQ means. To me, it means pretty darn quick. But what they did is there's a PDQ for health professionals, and look at right beneath it, go to a patient version. This is called cross-referencing. And when you go and click, you can go back and forth between the two. And if you notice, it has the links at the jump links at the top of the page. I'd probably put in an intro paragraph in here, but the words used for a health professional and how a health professional organizes information is very, very different from how a patient organizes information. So this was really well done. And then they used the word menu. They didn't use the hamburger icon. The search box is 27 to 30 characters wide, and the home page and usually a magnifying glass are universal. People understand what it means. So just know that. The other thing that happens if you don't let an information architect be part of the design and development process is we want to discover shortcuts. How do we discover shortcuts? We observe users. And this can be put in contextual navigation, which is what you saw right here, because sometimes people go to the wrong version. It happens. And you put shortcuts where people expect to see them and where people want to see them. You'll find that people will stay on your site and trust your site and return to your site more often if you have shortcuts in the right place. So I showed this, and this is from Information Architecture for the World Wide Web, shows where people expect to see things. On a blog, you might expect to see the navigation here over on the right side. And I said, this is the navigation system that people want to see while you're using tags. And I showed them an example of mobile because their target audience, it was half mobile, half desktop. But I got the big red light here, even though I showed them all the evidence and I was as polite and as nice as I could to ask these questions. Fortunately, the contract ended and I was able to get out and other people were able to get out. And I met the best UX designer I have ever worked with. And ultimately, it had a happy ending. Now, I know our time is running out. I just wanted to show you some items that might help you in the event that people ask about what is the purpose of navigation, what is the purpose of information architecture. The CDC used to have a wonderful, they got rid of their A to Z index, but what they had was really, really good cross-referencing. And they always spelled out abbreviations, and make sure you do this at the top of the page, because remember, people can enter your site, they don't know from the home page. And that's a site index. When your site is huge, you have a site index. When your site is smaller, you have a Wayfinder sitemap. Now, the silver lining of all of this, what came from my coworker who is total technical whiz, and she said, when you have an impossible project, you will often find solutions that you never thought to do. And the truth is, even though this was an impossible project because they were not going to budge from their predetermined information architecture and their predetermined navigation, but the solutions that the UX designer and I came up with were very good ones. And so we're glad we took the project. So that's email. I'm also Shari Thurow at gmail.com. I am very active on LinkedIn, so you can always connect with me during LinkedIn.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Shari. So we will end the webinar here.